Welcome to Loop TV. I'm Gene along with Doug. Our three topics today is the market officially ventures into correction territory. That's the NASDAQ. Second is Sony losing 12% of its value on Activision. Is that justified? And third, delays in 5G. What's causing them and what does that mean for 5G Nirvana, which we've been eagerly awaiting for? I'll bring it back to the top of the hour. And Doug, maybe you can kind of frame in. We just, at the end of the trading today, niched into correction territory, which is down 10%. Correction territory. We're not at the bear market point, which is down 20%. Just initial thoughts on taking this step into a new definition of where the market's at.
We've talked, a lot about what the Fed is doing with interest rates, the impact of higher interest rates on risk assets, in particular tech companies with high growth rates, and obviously they're more susceptible. That's been kind of the common narrative. Now the Nasdaq's down 10%. We know a lot of the even higher growth stories that we traffic in and we talk about sometimes on this show are down 30, 40, 50, 60%, and even more from their highs. So, the correction moniker feels accurate. And we've always said every time we talk about this topic that we're not, macro guys. We are not economists. It's kind of a fool's game to try to predict when we're hitting the bottom. I would say just sort of our gut things that we've been talking about internally. We feel like we're probably closer to the end of this sort of washout than we are at the beginning. That's one thing. But number two, I'll anchor us back on what we've said on every show where we talked about this, which is I think you just have to go look for great companies at good values and be prepared to weather continued choppiness.
I think, we're getting our shots. I think one thing that has proved to be true here is that even though some of these more emerging companies have been down kind of going into the past month, they were down 50, 60%. Those have continued to decline even much more than the NASDAQ. It's really not over, I think, until I was going to say, that singer sings. In this case, I think it is Chairman Powell. And I think that what he needs to really emphasize, I still come back to, I think we need this just a clear-headed view about where interest rates are going. We don't have that. And I'm eagerly waiting for the end of this month. I hope the Fed takes action. I think if they take the proper action, I think the market, we are closer to the end of this. I think if they delay and just kind of think about 3 rate hikes and starting at 25 basis points, I think we're going to continue to be in this choppy downward trend for another couple months here. So can't wait for the end of the month. Chairman Powell, look forward to hearing your commentary. On to our second topic, which is a holdover from what happened yesterday, obviously with Microsoft and Activision. Sony, their market cap was negatively impacted by this, down 12%. So there's $20 billion in value. Sony's roughly about $150 billion company. This is a big company. This is one that has locked horns with Microsoft. That duel is nothing new. Obviously, PlayStation for Xbox, that is almost like a religious conversation versus a technology one. And I wanted to ask you, Doug, when you think about that step back in valuation, that $20 billion impact that Sony had, what is your view? Is this justified?
It feels like an overreaction. I think if you put a little bit of a mathematical perspective to it, the gaming segment for Sony is about 35% roughly of their operating income. So it's a significant part, but they have other businesses like music, film, they make other devices. So they have a pretty diverse set of businesses. So 35% is gaming. The stock's down 12% roughly since the Activision news. If you adjust that mathematically, it's like saying the gaming business is down 35%. And so in that context, if you say Sony's gaming business is down 35%, that feels like an overreaction to me. I mean, we've always had, these competitive dynamics, to your point, between Microsoft with Xbox, Sony with PlayStation.
Let me interrupt.
And by the way, I want to mention real quick though. You mentioned them blocking horns in the past. Not everybody knows this if you don't follow the gaming space, and you might think Xbox is the bigger of the two, but the PlayStation has actually always been the highest selling console, even in this current generation. The PlayStation, I think, is still viewed as the premier device between the two. And so some people don't realize that Sony's gaming business with the PlayStation, I would say, is probably revered to a higher level than Xbox.
What's the thread for the step back in valuation? Is that somehow Microsoft is going to make Activision content exclusive, and therefore that's a knock? Why would this? Why would it even be such a hit to their valuation?
I think that's it. I think the idea is Microsoft is going to take some of the best titles in the world, things like Call of Duty, and maybe make them Xbox exclusives, and that makes the Xbox kind of suite of products, whether they're, digital streaming, which I think they'll be adding in time, the Game Pass, the console certainly makes them more competitive versus Sony's offerings. I think that's the big concern. My view, though, is we've always had these exclusive relationships in gaming, and Halo has always been an Xbox exclusive. It's one of the premier titles, including the new one, Halo Infinite, that just came out holiday season last year. And Sony has always had their own exclusive titles. They have the Spider-Man Miles Morales series, which is one of the top 10 best-selling games of last year. They have other relationships with other parties like Square Enix, where they have the Final Fantasy series that's exclusive to, has been exclusive to PlayStation. And so to me, it's not that new. Does it mean that Sony is going to face more competition from Microsoft? I think it does, but I don't think it means that the business is sort of impacted or impaired by 35%.
Makes sense. I would also venture that if, in fact, some of these Activision titles became exclusive, like you said, there's exclusive content right now on Xbox with Halo, there's exclusive on PlayStation, but I suspect that would be something where regulators would be asking those questions as we try to get approval. Are you going to make some of this content exclusive? And I just think that narrative doesn't play very well in DC right now. And so I suspect that the probability that more content becomes exclusive is less than maybe historically. Maybe there's like some advantage, a vertical integration advantage of having content built for your machine, the hardware perhaps, but I think I would agree with you, largely an overreaction. Our final topic, jumping to 5G, the deployment, it's running slow. It's taking time. It seems like a pretty non-eventful topic when you talk about the airports having concern about 5G towers and impacting the communications with the tower. Obviously, we don't want that happening. And so there's been a step back in terms of some of the technology that the carriers can roll out. Even though it sounds like an uneventful topic, I think it is important because for a couple of years, 3 years, we've been talking about the importance of 5G and this nirvana type experience, not just from a consumer perspective, but also new businesses that can be enabled, whether it's autonomous vehicles or augmented reality. And I just want to quickly put into perspective what this means, what the most recent news meant related to this step back, is that the carriers, the U.S. carriers, it's going to take some time for them to roll out 5G, and it's going to take even more time because now they have to kind of do a technical workaround here. And so far, 5G has been a disappointment. I think about Verizon's CEO, Hans Vestberg, I believe it was, when the iPhone 5G was announced in end of 2020, he talked about gigabyte speeds, and I had to roll my eyes when I heard that because I felt that that was 5 years away. I feel even more convinced of that today than ever. If you're curious, average download speeds with the 3 major U.S. carriers right now are about 120 megabytes, so or about 1/10 of that proclamation that was made a year and a half ago. And I think that we need to get to probably 300, 400, 500 megabytes down before consumers actually care about 5G. And so I think that this is a notable step back. It's going to take time for 5G. And I want to bring it back to a company that we study closely, which is Apple. This 3-year iPhone cycle, 5G cycle, I think could end up being 4 or 5 years. I think it probably comes at the cost of a little bit of demand in the near term over the next 12 months and at the benefit of what will be eventually demand around 5G. And so I'm going to bring you in here, Doug, and ask you, when do you think, purely guessing, when do you think we're going to have that nirvana moment where consumers are telling their friends, you got to upgrade because of 5G is so fantastic?
I guess you know me too well. Anytime you say you want to go left or right, I'll say I want to go up or down or parallel or something. And I'm going to say I don't know and I don't care when it happens. I'm always of the perspective that delays are some of the most distracting news that's almost never worthwhile. If you think about history, 3, 4, 5 years out, whenever we finally do get 5G, the reality is if it was delayed 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, it's not really going to matter. It's not going to matter in the course of human history. And so for me, if you're trying to trade around this, I understand trying to have a perspective on it. But if you're a long-term investor and you're trying to make investments in companies that are going to ultimately leverage 5G technology, then you just have to know that it's going to be something that could impact some of the timing of your cash flows, but it shouldn't be an existential issue for that business because they hopefully have other plans that they can work around any delays that they have to deal with.
So how would you describe, exiting the timing conversation and sticking to that human history arc? And I think that 5G makes that mark. I think 3G was part of human history. I'm curious, when do you think that it ultimately will live up to some of the hype? Or maybe a better way to say it is, what is your vision of 5G? Let's say 10 years from now, we think about what impact 5G has. How would you describe that?
Well, I would, to answer what I think you're getting at, which is, do I think 5G is meaningful of an upgrade or not? I mean, yeah, it's better than 4G, certainly. But I think you're going to have a 6G and you're going to have a 7G, and we're always going to be pushing higher speeds. I mean, if there's one thing we know for certain from this conversation is we're never going to be satisfied with the
Hmm.
speed that we have on our wireless devices or even our wired devices. We always want to pipe more bits to our devices. And so that's more the perspective that I'm looking at it from is when we look back, and I used to use the analogy of, think about the book being written about the history of whatever topic you're talking about 100 years from now. How many pages are really going to be devoted to 5G? Probably not that many. If we're writing about the history of internet communications, 5G might be a paragraph. And that's
Hmm.
still kind of where I land now. It will certainly enable some new technologies. And it's an evolution, a step function better than 4G. I'm not trying to downplay any of that. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that really matters is the human creativity that builds on top of some of these enabling technologies.
Hmm.
And, we already have wireless as an enabling technology. It's going to continue to improve. So I guess my contrarian perspective is, yeah, like 5G, we should be excited, but I don't think we should worry too much about any of these sort of near-term distractions in the delay conversation.
We almost should change the language and just escape from getting all wound up about 5G and just recognize that speeds are going up and maybe there's some acceleration points in the speed around a certain technology. Maybe it's 5G and then it kind of plateaus and steps up again. But the big picture, as you said, its speed is increasing. That would, I think, make one of your chapters. I remember when we went from dial-up to broadband and the impact
That's huge.
on
Yeah.
uh, so there are the kind of these step functions up. I think 5G is one of those step functions. I think it is conversational or a topic worthy of getting our heads around. But I think the better theme, I agree with you, is that the idea that just speed is going to be improving, because then it will be 6, 10, 10G, and on we go. We will
And
continue.
can I add just one last thought there too, which is I think it's really important to when you think about 5G, I think we get stuck on the speeds, but it's really about what are people going to build on top of it that matters. Like that's going to be actually what's in the history book. Think about 3G even, like you mentioned, or the change from dial-up to broadband. What's going to be in the history book, I don't think is going to be, some big chapter about how great it was that we laid fiber across the United
Mhm.
States. What it's going to be is about how that enabled YouTube to give people, creators, jobs where they sat behind cameras and created content that people love. That's what matters when we talk about higher speeds. And I would say the same thing for
Here,
5G.
here.
Higher speeds are great and the, infrastructure is great, but ultimately, if we don't do anything compelling with it, it doesn't matter that much.
Makes sense. You can drop now if you wanted just to hear what our three topics were for today. Stay on if you're curious for the extra edition. Doug has no idea what we're going to talk about right now. We have in the past, I have had a lapel mic. Today I have a boom. This is a change. Thank you for the creative feedback we've gotten from one of our viewers to put Loop's branding on the mic. It feels right. Doug, you don't have a mic today. It's ironic. The first day that I have it, you don't have it. And I'm curious, where are you, Carmen Sandiego?
Yeah, my trusty mic's back home right now. I'm in the mountains in North Carolina, so I've got my remote gear that doesn't include a Loop mic, unfortunately.
And do you know what internet speed you're running on now?
I'm actually on DSL, so old technology is still getting it done.
I never thought DSL would make it into a Loop TV episode. I'm thrilled it found its way. Thanks for finding a way onto the screen today, Doug. On behalf of Doug, Gene, and Loop TV, bye for now.